I watched the video of what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania about 50 times. I think I was one of about 8 billion people around the world who watched it. And the more I watched it, the more it struck me that everything was different after that moment. Everything. And this convention is different. The nation is different. The world is different. Donald Trump is different. When he stood up after being shot in the face, and put his hand up, I thought at that moment, that was a transformation. This was no longer a man. Well, I think it was divine intervention. But the effect that it had on Donald Trump, he was no longer just a political party's nominee or a former president or a future president. This was the leader of a nation. And I think there's a difference. I've spent most of my life in Washington where the president is at the top of the pyramid. Everyone wants to be the president. But if you think about it, the presidency comes with great power, obviously. But if you think about it, that is a title that is bestowed by a process of some sort that can be subverted. And in the end, it does not confer by itself, as no title does, legitimacy. Just because you call yourself the president doesn't mean that much inherently. And you hate to say it, but it is also true, it is a fact, that you could take, a mannequin, a dead person, and make him president. But being a leader is very different. It's not a title. It's organic. You can't name someone a leader. A leader is the bravest man. That's who the leader is. That is true in all human organizations. This is a law of nature. And in that moment, Donald Trump, months before the presidential election, became the leader of this nation. That was the most obvious to me. And I have to say, I think it changed him. He reached out to Trump within hours of it that night. And what he said to me that night, having just been in the face, he said not a single word about himself. He said only how amazed he was and how proud he was of the crowd, which didn't run. And I thought two things. The first thing I thought was, well, of course they didn't run. His courage gave them heart. A leader's courage gives courage to his people. And the second thing I thought was, this is the selfish guy I've been hearing about for 9 years? Really? Not a word about himself? About his people, period. And the second thing I noticed, which I don't think anyone has remarked upon in public, but I'm just going to since I don't have a script, like why not, is that he turned down the most obvious opportunity in politics to inflame the nation after being shot. To inflame the nation, which is an opportunity that almost every other politician I've ever met, and certainly his opponents, would have taken instantly. And they would have said, well, what is this? How did he get shot? Like, how did this happen? And those are real questions that we have to get to the bottom of. But in the moments, the days, the week after the he did not say that. And so I think the entire Trump project, paradoxically, is attacked as an enemy of democracy, is to return democracy to the United States. I think a lot of people are wondering, what is this? This doesn't look like politics. Something bigger is going on here. You don't see our commander-in-chief suggesting that we use our military to protect our country or the lives of its citizens. No, that's for. And it's too much, actually. It's too insulting. It's too insulting. It's a middle finger in the face of every American. It's a very clear statement, which is unmistakable. And that is, we don't care about you. And Donald Trump, whatever you say about him, and I think he's a wonderful person. I know him well. By the way, the funniest person I've ever met in my life, actually. You can't be funny without perspective or without empathy, which is true. But everything else about Trump aside, he actually cares because he's interested in the people who live here because that's his job. A father's job, his duty is to his family. An officer's duty is to his men. A president's duty is to his citizens. So I will stop on just one point, and that is what's happened over the past month since the debate, and particularly on Saturday in Butler. I think a lot of people are wondering, what is this? This doesn't look like politics. Something bigger is going on here. I think even people who don't believe in God are beginning to think, well, maybe there's something to this. The day after the midterm elections in 2018, Antifa came to my house. The Democratic Party's militia, okay? I was at work. It was obvious when I was at work because it was public. My wife was home alone. They tried to come in through the front door. She hid in her pantry. It was on television. It was horrible, actually. It was, I'm not whining about it. I wasn't getting shot in the face, but it wrecked our day. And the next morning, we're lying in bed, and the phone rings for my wife, and it's Donald Trump, who's not like a regular text buddy of Donald Trump's. She picks it up, hello? Susie, it's Donald Trump. And it's coming through, I could hear it. You know, I'm lying in bed, oh. And the first thing he says is, I'm gonna stand guard outside your house. And she goes, oh, it's just so nice. And he says, I'll never forget this as long as I live. He says, you know, there's a lot of hate out there. And she said, you know, there is, Mr. President. And then he says, but there's a lot of love. There's a lot of love.
Trump recounts the harrowing details of the incident.
Let me begin this evening by expressing my gratitude to the American people for your outpouring of love and support following the attempt at my rally on Saturday. As you already know, the bullet came within a quarter of an inch of taking my life. So many people have asked me what happened. Tell us what happened, please. And therefore, I will tell you exactly what happened. And you'll never hear it from me a second time because it's actually too painful to tell. It was a warm, beautiful day in the early evening in Butler Township in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Music was loudly playing, and the campaign was doing really well. I went to the stage, and the crowd was cheering wildly. Everybody was happy. I began speaking very strongly, powerfully, and happily, because I was discussing the great job my administration did on immigration at the southern border. We were very proud of it. Behind me and to the right was a large screen that was displaying a chart of border crossings under my leadership. The numbers were absolutely amazing. In order to see the chart, I started to, like this, turn to my right and was ready to begin a little bit further turn, which I'm very lucky I didn't do.
Trump immediately knew it was very serious when he heard a loud whizzing sound.
When I heard a loud whizzing sound and felt something hit me really, really hard on my right ear, I said to myself, wow, what was that? It can only be a bullet. And moved my right hand to my ear, brought it down. My hand was covered with blood, just absolutely blood all over the place. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack, and in one movement proceeded to drop to the ground. Bullets were continuing to fly as very brave Secret Service agents rushed to the stage, and they really did, they rushed to the stage. The amazing thing is that prior to the shot, if I had not moved my head at that very last instant, the bullet would have perfectly hit its mark, and I would not be here tonight. We would not be together. The most incredible aspect of what took place on that terrible evening in the fading sun was actually seen later. In almost all cases, as you probably know, and when even a single bullet is fired, just a single bullet, and we had many bullets that were being fired, crowds run for the exits or stampede, but not in this case. It's very unusual. Bullets were flying over us, yet I felt serene. But now the Secret Service agents were putting themselves in peril. They were in very dangerous territory. Bullets were flying right over them, missing them by a very small amount of inches. And then it all stopped.
Few people understand just how corrosive this is to the country and to the idea of the country.
It's a disgrace. What's happening to our country is a disgrace.
What more can Joe Biden do to go negative against Donald Trump?
They are destroying our country, and we're not going to let that happen. Again, this was a great day of victory. Last week was something very special, Super Tuesday, but now we have to get back to work because we have the worst president in the history of our country. His name is Joe Biden, sometimes referred to as Crooked Joe Biden, and he must be defeated. Our nation is failing. We're a nation that is in serious decline. We've never had a situation like this where we're not respected, we're laughed at, we're considered almost a joke. We're going to turn it around. We're going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to close our borders. We're going to do things like nobody's ever seen before, and we're going to make our nation's economy be the best ever in the world.
What does the majority of the country have in common with one another? Because look, if the arc of the last century's American history is super, super interesting. So you have this massive influx of immigration, the Ellis Island generation, late 18th, 19th, early 20th century. And it's both good and bad. We only remember the good, but there was a lot of social volatility, like a lot. Like the mayor of Chicago got in his house. There was on Wall Street, like the Wobblies, the anarchists, like the foot soldiers that were immigrants, working class European immigrants. And part of the problem was there was just a lot of immigrants, and I mean, Sacco and Vanzetti, who the clerk in, was it Brockton, Mass? Anyway, it was in Mass, outside Boston. They'd been in the country for just a few years, and they immediately got sucked into radical politics. Well, why was that? Well, because they weren't kind of bought in or rooted in or hadn't been fully assimilated into American society. So then you have the First World War, and we basically shut down immigration, and we have this period of settling where, like, all Americans, let's think through our civic religion, what ties us together, and then that leads into October of '29, and you do have this national crisis, lasts for more than a decade, and we had a successful, the CCC, we had these big programs, which I'll say this as a conservative, kind of worked in keeping people fed and focused, gave them purpose, kept the country from collapsing during the Great Depression.
If I were the Trump campaign, I would just run that clip.
Yeah.
It was and it reminds me of when Guy Benson was at the first debate, and we were in Milwaukee, and he talked to an Uber driver, black woman, who said, "I've never voted for a Republican, but I have a feeling that not only might I, but everybody in my family might as well." And it was all about the economy. And even today, Larry Summers, who was a big Democrat, was trying to warn Biden about inflation for a long time. He said inflation's probably worse than they realized. So I know why he went to Wisconsin. He's going to try to figure out a way to run that up. But the problem is the awfuls that you talk about, they are all for policies like EVs, student loan forgiveness, the climate stuff that are pushing up inflation and hurting the people that the Democrats have usually been able to reach. And so I don't think that this is falling on deaf ears in the black community. Now, does that mean that President Trump can get him out there to vote for him? I think that remains to be seen. I think there's a lot that has to be done in terms of the actual get out the vote efforts at the RNC on the national level, but certainly at the state level. The state Republican committees are no bueno.
I think the key point was really that it's important for us to have a referee, just as you have a referee in a sports game or all sports games, and that the games are better for it to ensure that the players obey the rules, play fairly. I think it is important for similar reasons to have a regulator, which you can think of as a referee, to ensure that companies take actions that are safe and in the interest of the general public.
Did you tell them that AI is a double-edged sword?
Yes.
And what did you mean by that? Can you explain that?
Well, the metaphor?
Yeah,
well, if you have a sword with two sides, one side can get you, even though you're trying to get someone with the other side.
When you're telling the senators that, though,
that's how it works.
What do you want them to take away?
I think it's more important to make sure your hilt is also you have a hilt, not a sharp thing.
Yeah. Fair enough. What do you think how do you think they took the message that you brought to them?
Well, I think it was very civilized discussion, actually, among some of the smartest people in the world. So I thought Senator Schumer did a great service to humanity here, along with the support of the rest of the Senate. And I think I think something good will come of this. I think this meeting may go down in history as being very important for the future of civilization.
Do you think some legislation is going to come out of this?
Probably. I'm not sure what the time frame of that is, but
yeah.
The legislative process is not a swift one.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think things will go in the right direction generally. Senator Schumer, or Leader Schumer, did ask everyone to raise their hands in the room to see if they were in favor of AI regulation, and I believe almost everyone did.
They have to close the borders. Our country is being overridden. This is an invasion. Our country is being invaded by people nobody even knows who they are, where they come from. millions of people. I predict 15 million people within a short period of time. Probably have 15 million people already. That's bigger than most states. And these people come from the wrong places. They're coming from very bad places. There's no checks. There's no balances. It's a disgrace. What's happening to our country is a disgrace. We have to close the border. Let people come in, but they have to come in legally.
I mean, he's swimming backstroke around Joe Biden. He's up in every battleground. He's even up nationally, which is unheard of for a Republican candidate. And he's cruising to the nomination. It's going to be a nice convention. And Biden's afraid to debate him. I wouldn't say he's drowning at all. I mean, and they're saying go negative. What more can Joe Biden do to go negative against Donald Trump? Launch a drone strike into Mar-a-Lago. They're going to arrest him for the 17th time. Take all of his buildings, all of his cash. What more could they call him? They've called him every name in the book. If you were a black American and you would being offered a choice, would you rather have the Trump economy? Would you rather have the Biden economy? It's a no-brainer. There was lower gas prices, only $2.47 a gallon under Trump. Rates were lower. The inflation rate averaged 1.9%. Black home ownership was up. Black wages were up extra $400 a month after 4 years. Wages are down under Joe Biden. Rates are high, home ownership's out of reach, gas prices are high because inflation's just eating everything.